Hello and welcome to example 2, scraping multiple pages. My name's Alex and I'm a teaching associate at the University of Nottingham, and I'm working with one of my fellow colleagues, Richard James, who is a postdoc at the University of Nottingham. So in today's short tutorial we're going to look at the 5 general steps to extracting information from multiple web pages. So we're going to look at how to kind of initialize empty vectors to store information. We're going to think about downloading a web page and extracting links to other web pages. We're then going to use a for loop to follow those links that we've extracted onto multiple other pages, and on each of those pages that we then visit we're going to extract information from each page. In particular, we're going to extract the title, the highlights, the main text and the author's names, and then we're going to think about how we can actually go about storing that extracted information. So when you have a big web scraping project, you have a choice about how you want to store that information. For small scale projects, like the kind of projects that we'll be doing when you're going over a web page, a couple of web pages, or you're going over a particular website, it might be okay to use things like vectors or lists to store that information that you extract into. If you're doing more large scale projects where you've got perhaps a huge amount of data you're collecting from multiple websites, etc., then it's probably more appropriate to use a database. But for the purposes of what we're doing today, we're just going to append the data vectors. So whenever I say vector, just think a column. We're going to put them, you have all those different items in different vectors, and then we're going to pull those vectors together into a data frame. And again, when I think data frame, just think spreadsheet. So the first step when you think about when we're writing this web scraping script, and again you'll see this in action when we go through the script after this PowerPoint, is to actually think about how to initialize these empty vectors to store information in. And that's really important, but it might sound a bit curious, like why are you initializing these vectors which are going to be empty, or what's the point or what's the purpose of doing that? And the reason is because when you use a for loop, so when you using a for loop, and we'll talk more about what a for loop is in a moment. When you use a for loop, you're iterating over different web pages, and you're pulling out information from each web page. But if you use a vector inside and create a vector inside that for loop and store information in that, it'll get overwritten every single time you run through that particular for loop. So every single time you pull out information from one page, and then you pull out information from the next page, the information for the first page you pulled out information from will be overwritten by the most recent page you're on. So clearly that's not an ideal situation. So what we need to do to get around this issue is to try and initialize vectors before you have the for loop. So you create the vectors, empty vectors, you then have the for loop, and then within that for loop you're extracting information, and then you're into a vector, and then you're appending that vector into the vector you created outside the for loop. And that is a way of getting around this issue of information being being kind of overwritten inside the for loop. And again, that will become more apparent when we talk through the actual code, the actual script. So in terms of moving across multiple pages, there are multiple ways to move across multiple pages in a website. The approach that we're going to use today is going to be accessing links off a particular page, because the majority of websites on the internet will contain links that you can use to access other pages. So we're going to use the links that you can find on a page and extract those links and then follow those links so by looping over them to automatically move over different web pages. Of course, the actual approach that you use will very much depend upon the layout of the particular site, but the majority of sites will contain links, and therefore you can extract those links and use that to go over the different web pages. So that's the approach we're going to use today. And in order to do that, we're going to use, as we've already used in example 1, the download the HTML read underscore HTML file function to download and parse a web page. And then in order to extract the links from that particular web page to other web pages, we're going to use the HTML nodes function and also the HTML attributes function to then extract those links. So HTML nodes function kind of identifies the part of the web page that contains those links, and then the HTML attributes function extracts the links in those parts of the web page. So that's how we're going to download and extract the links to other web pages. In terms of a for loop, and I mentioned this a few times, and if you're new to R, then this is going to be quite useful. If you already know R and you've used it quite a lot, I apologise. This is going to be a little bit slow for you, but it's important that we kind of are all on the same page here. So the basic structure of a for loop is the following. So you have the keyword for, and then you have open up brackets, curly brackets, and you have, and it doesn't have to be an I, it could be any kind of word, but it's some sort of word or letter, and then and then there's normally like a sequence or a list, or a list, it could be a series of numbers, and then you end the bracket. So what that's saying is for every, and then I in the sequence, do, and then repeat the following code that is then enclosed, the following code that's then enclosed in these squiggly brackets. So this code is going to get repeated X amount of times depending upon the arguments in this function. So notice the syntax here. So you've got for keywords, you've got you opening up your brackets, and you've got something in, and in's quite crucial, and then something else, which is normally a sequence or list. Then you've got these squiggly brackets, which basically means, and then any code inside the for loop is normally indented to make it easier to read. And this code was repeated X number of times depending upon the conditions up here. We just flesh that out a little bit more to the actual example using our script. So we've used for, and then open up the brackets I, so we've just created I, doesn't matter what particular I is. You could have put pages, you could have put X, you could have put T, it doesn't matter, we went I in blog pages. Now blog pages is a vector which we've actually got these web pages in. So this is, we've already extracted, downloaded the web page and extracted these links. So I is going to become each one of these web pages. So which then tells us that the loop's going to run 5 times, because I is going to be, on the first run it's going to be this, on the second one it's going to be this, third one it's going to be this, fourth one it's going to be this, fifth one it's going to be this. And so this loop is going to run 5 times. I will become each one of those, and then each time we will download that web page, and we'll extract some information using some code that you've already came across. We're going to then store some information, and then we're going to close the loop there. And again, if you get any of the syntax wrong, so you miss out on these curly brackets, or you miss out on these kind of brackets as well, then you basically will throw an error and it won't run. So the syntax is very important. So in terms of extracting information from each page, it's going to be relatively simple. It's going to be kind of very similar to what you've already done before in example 1. So we're first going to download the page and pass that particular web page into a document object model, and we're going to use the read HTML function to do that. Except this time, instead of giving it a unique URL, we're going to give it I, because if you remember in the previous slide, I is going to be this. On the first rotation, I is going to be this. In the second rotation, I is going to be this. In the third rotation, fourth and fifth rotation. So we're going to give the read HTML function I. So it's going to become each one of those separate, those 5 links. And then we're going to use the HTML nodes function and HTML text functions, and then extract the information from each of those pages for the scraper to visit. So if we just perhaps flesh this out a little bit and go to the website, you can see here in example 2, we're basically trying to visit each one of these news stories. So each one of these articles we're trying to go and visit, and the links are contained within these titles. So you can see there are the 5 titles, and we want the scraper to visit each one of the articles, go to that particular page, and then pull out the title, the highlighted text in the top paragraph, the main text, and also the author's name. So we're pulling out 4 bits of information. And then we want it to do that, and then we want it to then go to the next article, and we want it to follow this particular link, and we want it to pull out the title, the highlights, the main text, and the author, and so on for all the articles. So that's what we want it to do. So we're going to use the nodes and the HTML text function to pull out that information, and we're going to save that to a vector. And this is all possible because the web pages in the site are storing the information in exactly the same place across all of the selected pages. And it's this systematic structure of web pages that, of course, makes web scraping possible. So, as mentioned earlier, when using a for loop, there is the danger that any information stored to vectors created inside the for loop will be overwritten each kind of run of the for loop. So to avoid this one, we've initialized the vectors outside the for loop, and then on each iteration of the for loop, we will append the information gained inside the for loop to the vectors outside the for loop to avoid this problem of overwriting. And we'll see how that's done in the flesh in just a moment. So if you can now go and download, if you haven't already, the web scraping example2 script, and you can go to this URL here. Or if you can, and then if you might be a nice idea to open up the practice website as well, so you can just have a little feel and look around the example, so you can kind of understand what we're doing and how it's kind of operating. Then you can click on this link here. So just give you a moment or two to copy those links or to click on them. Okay, so when you've got it downloaded, it should look a little bit like this. So, as always, when using R, it's always really important to, if you haven't already installed the RVS package, please do, because that's the package you're using, and then please make sure you've loaded that into your library. So if we have a look here, I haven't got this loaded into my library, so I'm going to need to load it into my library so I can run that, and it should be loaded into my library, and you can see it's now ticked on the packages site as well. So that's good, so that's now in our library. So what I meant by initializing vectors, or how you initialize vectors, is you simply create a name. So in this case, I've created title, highlights, main text, and author, because these are kind of the vectors, or the information I want to pull out. And then I've used the less than the hyphen sign to kind of assign anything on the right of these to title. And then we've used the C, so the concatenate function with the empty brackets to denote a vector. So basically we're going to be saving an empty vector to title, highlight, main text, and author. And if you run that text, you can see in the values section up here on the right that you've got author, which is null and empty, highlights, which is null and empty, main text, null and empty, and title, which is null and empty. So that's initializing the empty vectors to store to later on. So that's really important. So we've done that now, so you can move on. So the next section is really thinking about calling and downloading and passing the web page into a document object model, and then using the HTML nodes function, the HTML attributes function, to then extract those links onto the subsequent web pages. So we'll walk through each of these lines step by step. So first of all, again, as we did in example 1, we're going to use a read HTML function on the web page on our WordPress site. So this is example 2 web page, and we're going to save that to example 2. So if we do that and we run that line, you'll find that you have a little list here which contains the information from that downloaded web page. It's telling me it's an XML document, it has XML nodes, so that's all good. We're then going to extract the links using this text here. So we're going to use the HTML nodes function, and we're passing it the data argument. So passing the data we want it, and we obviously passing it example 2. So we're passing it that website that we've just downloaded and passed, and then we're saying, hey, it'd be really useful if you can pull out the information that's stored in links A. So how did we get to links A? How do we generate that? So we generated that CSS selector by coming on to page, activating selector gadget tool, clicking on the title, because we know the title contains the links, and then I've clicked on exercise 2 there because I don't want all this additional information that was highlighted yellow. So if I unclick it, you can see all this information comes into play. I don't want all of these links, I just want this link, and this link, and this link, and this link, and this link to all the different news articles. So that's the links I'm really interested in, and you can see that is called links A. So if you copy that, then you can indeed paste that, as I have done, into that section here. So now it's going to pull out those HTML nodes that contain the links that we want. Now, in order to get the links out from those nodes, we need to then use a HTML atch function to pull out the links, and we use the href argument to pull out those particular website links. So indeed, if you run this line of text, blog pages, you can see that we've got a new vector that's been created, which is a character vector, and it's got 5 elements, 1 to 5 elements. Indeed, if you ever want to test what something is, then you can always use str, which stands for the structure function, and you can type blog pages, and it'll tell you that it's a character which has 1 to 5 vectors. You can then print them out if you want to, if you're interested in looking at what those are. But again, we've already seen this in the PowerPoint, and there are the 5 web addresses. So now we've got those links, we will be able to traverse from by using those links to the different pages. And the way we're going to traverse from different pages, as we mentioned in the PowerPoint, is to use the for loop. So let's just talk through, because the for loop can be a little bit confusing if you've never used one before. And again, I apologize to those people who have already used R. So we're going to use a keyword for, and you can see that's now recognized, and it's all highlighted in blue. And we're going to say for I, and this could be anything. We could have named that pages, we could have named it anything we wanted to, we could have named it Y, it doesn't really matter. In blog pages, now of course this relates to the vector that has all those links stored in it, so that's kind of important to get those two names identically the same. So remember that R is a case-sensitive language, so if you did put lowercase blog pages, it just wouldn't recognize it. So you do need to make sure it's spelled exactly the same with upper and lower cases, which is why it's often great not to type things out, but to copy and paste things, so you don't make the simple mistakes just by typing errors and then wonder why your code's not working, why it can't find things. So for I in blog pages, so I is going to become each one of these 5 links, as mentioned in the PowerPoint. And I've then added in a new line here, which is system.sleep2. This is kind of useful because this just basically tells the computer to basically have a little break, have a pause for 2 seconds, and then carry on with the rest of the script. So what this is important, because if you make too many calls to a website in too quick a shorter space of time, it can actually increase the traffic to that website, and it could be interpreted as a denial of service attack, a DOS attack, which could get you in a lot of trouble. So it's always a good idea just to be more friendly and put in a little pause, just so you're not overloading the website. Some people also have back-offs as well, where again it's a bit more technical, so you don't need to go into it, but basically that means it responds in regards to the amount of traffic, or sensitive to the amount of traffic the website has, and will back off more when there's more traffic to the website. But we're just going to use this simple kind of a little pause. So that's just kind of a nice friendly web scraping. Now, of course, when you're scraping a massive site like Wikipedia, it wouldn't really matter you sending a scraper over it particularly. With smaller websites, it might be more of an issue. But generally, if you can just put a pause in there, I think it's nice and friendly to do so. So next step is to then download and parse each of the 5 pages that we're interested in. So the way you do that, again, as we've seen, is we're going to use the read HTML function, and we're going to call this on, and this is the key part, on I. So we're going to call it on I. So that is going to be this on the first rotation, this on the second rotation, this on the third rotation, this on the fourth rotation, this on the fifth rotation. So in each time you run this for loop, it's going to go to each of these web pages, download that web page and parse it, and save that information in example 2. Now, we then need to extract information from each of these pages that we're visiting, and we'll do that by, again, using the HTML nodes function, passing it the actual argument of the web page. So we're going to use example 2, the one we just got. And we're going to then, as we have done before, use select a gadget to pull out the title, the highlights, the main content, and the author. So I'll just go through one of those now. You've seen me do this quite a lot. So we're going to go to the first web page, which is this one here. So I'm just going to close this down, go to this web page, activate select a gadget, and click on the title. So you click on the title, it's highlighted nicely in green, and it's the only thing we want on this page, so just checking that there's nothing else that's highlighted. There's nothing else that's highlighted, so this is the right CSS selector to pull out that information from that page. So then you can highlight, copy and paste that in, as I have done. And then we're saying we're passing that using the pipe function from the Metagear package to HTML text, which is then just going to pull out that information we want and save that. So we can't run these lines individually, you have to run them all together because they're in a for loop. But basically what I've done is I've then done that for similar process for highlights. So I've called it and saved it as hi, main content, and author. So that'll pull out the title, the highlights, the main text, and the author text. And now, in order to store this is the new part. I'm going to take title, so what we created up here, and I'm going to add to title. I'm going to append title, which again is going to be empty on the first run, and heading. And a heading is the new information that we've just extracted. So that will contain one heading on the first run. On the second run, title will contain a heading, and heading will also contain one heading. So when you append those together on the second run, this will then contain 2 bits of information over here. On the third run, so the third web page we visit, and we pull out the title, heading will again just contain one title, and the title will contain 2 because that's from the previous run, and you add the 2 to the 1, and that'll give you 3. So on the third run, by the end of the third run, once you ran that line of code on the third website you visited, that title will now have 3 bits of information. So you can see each time that 1 bit title from heading is then being added to the previous information that's stored in heading in title, and that's been added to title. So title is continuously growing by 1 each run through the iteration. And the same happens for highlights, main text, and author. And then we're closing the for loop bracket. So we will just run those now, because this will take a little bit of time, because it has to visit 5 websites, and each time it does that, it'll take 2 seconds delay, so it'll take probably about 10-11 seconds. So I'll run that now, and whilst that's happening, I'll just talk through this. So now when that came through, we'll have all this information as it just popped up now. What we'll want to do is try and put that into a nice neat format. So we'll put that into a data frame, and again we can do that because all of these author, heading, title, highlights are all of the same length. So we can put that into a data frame, and again we can use this function here, which will, as I mentioned in example 1, so I won't run over in great detail. We're going to create a vector called a variable in our data frame, a column in our data frame called ID, and we'll use the sequence to generate a number sequence for us, and ID numbers for us, and then we're doing that by sequence 1 to length of title. So title in this case will be 5, so it'll be 1 to 5, so it'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5. And that'll be one variable. Then we're also adding highlights, main text, and author to that as well. And I should probably also add title, because that would be nice to have the title in that data frame as well. So I'll just add that there. So we should have 5 variables in that. So I'll run that line of code, and indeed we have 5 variables, and you can check out that data frame here. So click on it, and voila, so you have the title, you have the highlights, the main text, and the author. So that's now quite nice and ready and friendly for us to then go about and think about analysing. And then you can use RM, which just basically removes some of the information from your workspace permanently, to try and clear it up a little bit and make it a bit more user friendly. So that's all I pretty much wanted to talk about in this exercise, in this example. Please, once you've kind of watched this through and you think you understand, you think you get it, please have a go at creating your own web scraping script, but do so for exercise 2, and try and again follow similar sorts of try and extract the title, the highlights, the main text, and the author from exercise 2. So if we just close this down, you can see exercise 2 is here, and you have 3 articles this time to kind of loop over and to try and extract that information from. So have a go at exercise 2 and then move on to example 3. Thank you very much for listening.